Hi guys, we're Dan and Michelle with Honeymoon Always, and as you may know if you're following along with us on Instagram, we have been doing a ton of travel. Our main business is in honeymoon travel, so we've been all around Europe, which has been an actual dream come true, and for sure one of the reasons we wanted to move to Portugal. But as we've been back home and relaxing and getting back into a routine, we started noticing kind of a trend or have become familiar with people who are choosing to leave Portugal. And it's something I don't think a lot of people talk about, and we just thought it's important to bring up that, you know, there's so much content around how wonderful Portugal actually is, and I don't think most of that is misleading, but I don't know that there's a lot of content around the things that are difficult, and the things that are so difficult that sometimes it causes people to choose to go home. And so we want to talk today about 5 things we've noticed that might be reasons that cause people to end up leaving Portugal.
So one major theme that we see when it comes to people struggling with their move to Portugal is misset expectations. There are so many articles and lists of places to retire to that put Portugal like near the top of the list. You're looking to be a digital nomad, it's going to be near the top of the list, if not the top of the list. And so it can sound like it's this wonderful paradise that is the perfect place for everyone to move to.
The other thing that we see a lot of is people talking about how inexpensive it is to live here. So not only does it have an amazing community and a beautiful culture, and there's a beach and the weather is great, but you won't spend any money. And it can make it really difficult to kind of see the reality of the day-to-day, which is what you will be living, right? Like you will love looking up and seeing a castle. You will love, getting to try all the food and living in Europe. You love all of that, but there are day-to-day things that add up to make things difficult. And I think those can get lost in the glossy, glamorous side of how wonderful Portugal is.
Yeah, and even us included, like if you watch our Instagram, we're not always talking about all the little things that go wrong from time to time. Not only is it like not engaging, like people don't want to see it really, but also we don't want to post it because like we already lived it. We can put that behind us and move forward with our life. So in preparation of your move, do your research. Look at apartment costs and food costs. You can look it up all online. So do that and look into what is important to you as you make the move, so you are prepared for what is to come. And also remember that people like us that are posting, like we're posting now after we've been here for over a year, and a lot of the stumbling blocks, they're out of our way. So like our picture of Portugal and living in Portugal is much more rosy than it was our first 2 weeks, 2 months.
Oh my gosh. No, I'm with you. I watched a couple of our old videos, our early ones, and I can like see the terror in my eyes specifically. I just noticed and I truly didn't know how stressed I was. I truly couldn't articulate it. I didn't know how in the thick of it I was. And you don't know. And even we tend to say it took us about 6 months to really relax before we really felt like, okay, that's good. But now we're a year in and I'm like, oh gosh, we're so much more relaxed now than we were 6 months ago. So it really takes time, and each stage, I feel like it's so hard at the beginning and it gets easier and easier and easier. So if you are in the thick of it right now, truthfully, we really believe it does get easier, and it can feel really acute, but it does get easier. Another theme that we see amongst people who come here and maybe aren't that happy and potentially even leave is that they maybe didn't have a super clear reason to come to Portugal specifically. Now, it's very obvious to most of us that Portugal has a lot of amazing qualities, but then when something really big gets in the way, if you don't have a really clear reason to be here specifically, not just like, oh, I want to get out of the United States or I want to move to Europe, it can be really hard to stick with it if sticking with it is right for you. I think something I didn't know is that when we moved here, every little thing is hard. Absolutely everything. I got yelled at for standing in a bathroom line wrong once. I've been yelled at by plenty of older women. Everything is wrong. Everything is wrong. Getting something from the pharmacy is so difficult. Even last week, I picked up the wrong thing from the pharmacy because there was a communication error, and I spent 3 days feeling terrible because I was taking the wrong thing and I didn't realize it. So it's just every little thing adds up together, and then it can snowball. And so then I feel like it also just amplifies things about you that you may not have known. So I feel like early on, Dan and I were kind of dealing with some things that we didn't expect to encounter, things we'd even talked about before we came, but the reality of being here just is different. And so if you don't have that strong idea of why you're coming, it can be really hard to navigate and push through those things.
You can always just come for vacation. If you just want to get to know Portugal, come for 3 months, and go back. But if you're coming here to move and you're ready to and really dive deep and actually live here, just be prepared that there's gonna be some traction there.
Yeah, I think I was just saying this on our Instagram account, but that like I've been trying to remind myself of this mantra that there is no failure, there's only learning. And I feel like people who tend to do well here recognize that if you learn that you don't like something or that something is not working for you, making an adjustment is just learning. And if what that means is that Portugal is not right for you and you need to go home, that's not a failure. That's just you've learned something about yourself, and that's great. So that's something I still try to remind myself of, because especially coming from the United States where it feels like very productivity culture, and having a goal in mind and not necessarily meeting those goals can add kind of insult to injury, especially when you're doing so many new things here. So trying to keep in mind that everything is a learning opportunity. It will be tiring. It will amplify things about yourself you didn't know. But if you have a clear reason for why you came that you can remind yourself, you can talk about it with the person you came with. If you came with somebody, it's a really good kind of North Star for staying here if you want to.
Yeah, like some of the things that we moved here for first are like the surface level things, like the climate, the beaches, all that stuff. And we definitely try to incorporate that into our daily lives. But also there were more fundamental things that are harder to adjust to. For example, we wanted to move away from the U.S. Corporate hustle culture. Mm-hmm. And that still, to this day, is something I'm working on, because every moment I'm like, oh, I could get this done for work. And like, I'm trying to change that about myself. So, but keeping that in mind, like kind of helps us, like centers us and keeps us like going in a positive direction to get through like harder times, like living here in Portugal.
To Dan's point, moving here it will change you in ways that surprise you, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you will change just because you're in a new place, and that you will change in the ways that you expect. And so there are things that we were hoping to leave behind in the US that we're having to make more active choices about here, just to make sure that we're not putting extra pressure on ourselves for hustle culture or being too engaged in things that stress us out, like US news. So these are the types of things that you may have to take a more active effort in changing once you move.
All right, so another thing that compounds on top of everything else is a lack of community. Some people have reached out and said like, hey, I just feel alone, and they're having trouble like building that community. So first we'll talk about some things to do before you come, and then like what you can do once you get here. I mean, Portugal is rated as having like some of the friendliest people, but that doesn't mean they're going to be coming out of the woodwork to invite you over to dinner and to be part of your community. You have to do some things yourself. So first thing is just to be active on Facebook. Like there's so many groups of people that are moving to Portugal that you can go in, you can post about yourself, but also like see what other people are posting, and don't be afraid to just reach out, even if it sounds a little weird to like DM someone that you don't know, to start building that community of people you know that are moving to Portugal around the same time that you are.
Yeah, I think a big thing for us is like community was really high on our list of reasons we wanted to move. And it's funny that we knew that when we were in Austin, like we didn't put in a lot of effort to have a community. So of course we didn't really have that big of a community. And a big differentiator for us here is that we started being public about living here. And as people got a vibe for us online, people have reached out. So we've become very lucky because of our public situation that people have reached out to us, but it has also required us to be braver and more outgoing and get better at connecting with people more proactively in ways that we were not anywhere near doing when we were living in Texas. So it's going to take some stretching. Like you can't just expect that it's going to come to you. You have to put in a little bit of effort. So before you come, you can check out Facebook groups, but even while you're here, there's plenty of Facebook groups. And I would also recommend, not necessarily that you have to blow up your privacy or whatever, but having some sort of public presence where you're connecting with people. Like say you have an Instagram account that maybe doesn't even show your face, but it shows a little bit of your personality. And then when you DM somebody like us, if you DM us and say, hey, like I'm here, do you want to meet up? We can get a vibe for who you are, because we're not going to meet up with someone who we have no vibe. Like that's weird. We don't know you. So, and I think that goes for everybody. And I think us having a public persona has made it easier for us to reach out to people too, because we're like, hey, they can see who we are. They can see our faces. They can get a vibe for who we are. And if they don't want to hang out, they can just say no or ignore us or ghost us or whatever. And it just feels like it's a lot more approachable because we already have a little bit of shared information that's on the internet. So I would recommend being a little bit brave and putting yourself out there on the internet in some capacity.
Once you get here, look into meetup groups. They have several for like all sorts of different things that you might be interested in. Like they have digital marketing meetups, but they have ones that are like, art meetups or just tons of things that you can go and meet new people so that way you can build your community.
Now, one thing that was really surprising for me was the time change between my family living in the United States and being here. So my old community is living on the west coast of the United States, and that's 8 hours behind. So I'm awake for a full 8 hours before any of my family wakes up. And something that's been really helpful to kind of bridge that gap has been the app Marco Polo, where you're sending videos at any time of day. The only kind of tricky thing is finding some quiet space in Lisbon because it's pretty noisy outside, and I prefer to be out walking or doing something else while I'm filming. So that's been a little tricky, but that app really has allowed me to maintain really good quality connections with my friends and family.
And you can meet friends doing the things you love. So like I go to surfing, and the people at the rental place there, they know me, and I've got to know people when I was at like my surf class. So just as you go about your life here, be open to meeting new people and trying to put yourself out there.
Another reason we're seeing people have a really hard time here is that they're having a difficult time finding support for the things they need, whether that's mental health support, medical support, or anything of that sort. And our first recommendation would be to talk to a therapist before you move. Because again, moving here is just going to amplify a lot of things. And you don't magically become a different person when you move here. But I think being in any sort of like high stress, repeated chaos situation, like moving to a new country, it's going to amplify those things about yourself that are maybe not your favorite. And we definitely saw that with ourselves. And so talking to a therapist before you move might help you make sense of some of the things that are going on in your life and might give you some tools before you move, which I think would be really helpful. Now, once you move here, I will be honest, it is a little bit more difficult to find help, specifically a therapist. There are a couple of things that go into this. If you're not a Portuguese speaker like me, you're going to want someone who speaks English super well, enough so that they can, speak with you fluently and understand you completely. But what's really difficult is on top of that is a lot of cultural differences and changes. Like, there are just fundamental differences in the way that people in Portugal were raised versus people in America. And so if you have anything that is specific to being an American, which usually you do, that can be really difficult to communicate. And so, finding a good therapist that's the right fit for you is always difficult, but then it's going to be even more difficult once you come here because you have all these language and cultural things to manage. So we do know that there are Facebook groups and Facebook comments where people are recommending English-speaking therapists and therapists that moved from the United States who were trained in the United States and live in Portugal. So that might be a good option for you once you move. And I can speak to the finances side of things. For me, therapy is less expensive here, paying out of pocket, than my copay with insurance was in the United States. So for me, that has been a positive thing, but then we also learned that our insurance will subsidize some of the cost. So hopefully it'll be even less expensive. One thing I will say is that I did establish a relationship with a therapist in the United States, and they didn't feel comfortable because they're not licensed to help someone outside of the state that they are licensed in. So that is a reason why it can be difficult to maintain your therapist once you move. I don't know what to tell you about that. The other side of this is just general medical support. And I don't know what to tell you about this. This part is just difficult. There are cultural things that are different, even about things you would just think are like bodies are bodies. Everyone's treated the same, but there are cultural applications to things. For example, recently went to a women's well check doctor who definitely gave me the business about being in my mid-30s and not having children. So there's definitely a difference in cultural expectations around certain medical things that you'd think would be otherwise fairly straightforward. So I don't have a lot of tips for this other than to just like give you fair warning and let you know it might be coming.
Yeah, it's like a great healthcare system. You're going to get health care, but there's just cultural differences. I've heard pain management is different here, which, that's a whole other thing in the United States of like the whole opposite of that. In Europe, I understand that like narcotics are just prescribed much less, which kind of makes sense. But sometimes you might just want something more than Advil. Anyway, and the last reason that we've seen some people have to leave Portugal or consider leaving Portugal is taxes. My least favorite subject. So in planning to come to Portugal, of course we research taxes, and I know other people have researched taxes. And if you're retired, it's pretty straightforward. But if you are self-employed or a remote worker, it can get complicated. And the range of percentage that you might have to pay taxes on is huge. So you could do the research and think you're going to fall into a certain category at like 20%, let's say, and then talk to a tax expert who may or may not confirm that, but come here and be told that actually you're at a much higher percentage rate that you're going to be taxed tax debt. So speak to several tax accountants, because I've been told different things by different tax experts that would have made a huge difference in how much we were paying in taxes. Now we've got it sorted out, after speaking to several like highly qualified tax experts here in Portugal, but that is one concern that you should have if you are not retiring to Portugal.
It's to the point where we really do know people who have left because the tax situation is different than what they expected when they did their research to move here. Now, we know that this is a super engaging topic. We get a lot of questions. We've gotten plenty of requests to do a video specifically about taxes. And as we mentioned, it's Dan's least favorite subject. So please don't DM us about this. We are actually considering doing a video, but we're only going to do it with the consent of our actual tax accountant, because we get a lot of requests for our contact information specifically for our tax accountant. And we don't have his consent yet. So when we have his consent, we will create a video and we will tell you the situation that we know, and we will have him on and we'll explain everything. But until then, we will not be sharing your accountant's information. So please don't DM us about it, because it will also make Dan's beautiful hair fall out. So okay, so those are the 5 reasons that we've seen people have a really hard time when they move here. Hopefully this will help you prepare for your move, or if you're in the middle of dealing with some of this, we hope you feel a little bit less alone. We've gone through almost every single one of these things, and we hope that you can find the resources that you need to help get you to wherever it is that you want to go. If you found this helpful, we hope you will leave us a comment, subscribe to our channel, follow along with us on Instagram at Honeymoon Always, and we'll talk to you later.